Hello, my name is Eric, and today I'm making a wooden mug. So I grabbed 3 different types of mugs, all made in a similar format to what I plan to do. It's made of multiple pieces, cut on an angle and stacked side by side. Then when you roll those pieces together, you'll get a circular shape. Naturally, the more pieces that you have, like on this mug up here, the rounder your shape would be, as opposed to this mug over here, which is made with far less pieces. And as expected, you'd get this very kind of blocky, almost like a stop sign looking shape down at the bottom. So first decision for our mug is that we need a lot of pieces to make this thing look round. Next thing we gotta look at is the handles. Now the mug in the upper left, we've got this kind of rounded looking handle. The mug in the upper right, we've got kind of this fancy handle. The mug down at the bottom, we've got kind of a combination of both. I think for our overall aesthetic, I'm gonna look for a little bit more of a fancy handle. The next thing we need to start to look at is the band that goes around the mug, and we need to decide, do we want one or do we not want one? We've got a few different types. Up here, we've got a band that actually looks like it's cut into the mug a little bit. This band down here just goes on the outside of the mug and is attached with a little bit of hardware. And this mug up here has no band, which I actually prefer. I think based on that, we're gonna go with no band. Now let's talk about the mug itself. We wanna make sure that it works as an actual mug. And because of that, we gotta think about what we're gonna do on the inside of this mug. We can see our mug in the upper left-hand corner has this kind of stainless steel insert, which takes away from the rustic feel a little bit. The mug in the bottom left doesn't have anything on the inside, maybe other than some wax or something. I think that could work, probably becomes watertight with all the glue and everything holding it together. But I think what I'm gonna do is go with epoxy. Okay, those are some pretty rough guidelines, but it's a start. Let's get to designing. Okay, now we gotta figure out our design, and that all starts with the angles. So let's start with a shape that is very simple and has no angles, a circle. We know that that's gonna be 360 degrees. What if we start adding some sides? If we went to a square, we could take that 360 degrees, divide it by our 4, and as expected, that gets us our 90 degrees. But we've got to cut that in half to account for 2 sides. So 90 divided by 2 gives us 45-degree angles for each of our cuts. Now we can just multiply that out for how many sides we want our mug to have. Going back to our designs, we know that more sides equals around a mug, so we'll try for 15. So for this, we can do 360 divided by 15 gets us 24. Then we need to divide that by 2 again. That means that each of our cuts is gonna have to be at 12 degrees. That should theoretically give us a nice round shaped mug, hopefully rounder than that. Okay, next let's talk about our cuts. What I'm planning to do is cut strips of wood that measure 3/4 of an inch in width by about 1/4 of an inch in depth. And ultimately, this is where our 12-degree cut is going to come in. Now, if we take this board and kind of lay it on its side, you can start to see how this thing will come together. We'll put our 12-degree cuts. That'll remove this material. And when we stack a whole bunch of those side by side, we should be able to roll this over and make this cylinder type shape. But now we need to start thinking about the bottom of this mug. So for that, let's stand these pieces up vertically. Now let's start to look at our options. So one option would be just to glue a bottom to the bottom of our cylinder here, but I think aesthetically that might look a little off. So what I'm gonna do instead is cut a dado in the bottom of our pieces. Planning to use wood that's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and that'll make up the width of the dado cut. This way, when our mug is sitting on the table, you won't be able to see the bottom because it'll be about 1/4 of an inch inside of the mug. From a look standpoint, that'll look the sharpest. As for the handles, I think that'll be pretty simple. basically planning to use some scrap wood that I've got from any leftover cuts. Find a design that I like, cut it out, rinse and repeat on all the other ones. That should give us a pretty simple mug at the end of the day. Our bottom will be inside the mug. We'll have a handle on the side. And it'll be made up of a bunch of different pieces. Pretty simple overall. Let's get to work. All right, so I'm gonna use a combo of 3 different types of wood. I got some walnut, some cherry, and some ash. We do a little bit of work to get these things planed to about 3/4 of an inch, run it through the joiner and get it flattened. Then with one flat edge, I can start cutting my 1/4 inch strips. Okay, at this point, I got enough of these strips cut to make 3 very large cylinders. Right where I anticipated, about 3/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch by 12 inches long. Time to cut the angles. Then I'm able to throw these pieces side by side on some tape. Roll it up, see how I did? So at this point I have a choice. I can go with 3 12-inch mugs or 6 mugs measuring about 5.5. I went with the 5.5. All right, so let's talk about this dado cut. I got some scrap wood measuring 11 3/4 inches. So with my fence slid all the way over, I'll slide it over 1/4 of an inch for the bottom. And then I'll slide it over another 1/4 of an inch for the dado cut. That's going to get me to 12 1/4 on my fence. I'll stick down my piece flush with the blade, lower the blade to the depth that I want the dado cut, about halfway. Slide my fence back over to the starting position. Make the first cut. So for the bottoms, I've got this solid piece of 1/4-inch oak. I'm going to cut it a little bit proud of the line. And then just sand it down, constantly checking to see if I got the perfect fit. It's time to glue it up. I went heavy on this glue, but figuring I wanted it to be watertight, it was worth it. Handles are pretty simple. I found a shape that I liked, traced it on some scrap wood, and then used that as a template to trace it onto my other pieces. A little cutting, a little shaping, I've got my handles. Then after quickly sanding the outside, I'm going to use a little wood glue with some rubber bands to hold these in place. So the next day I'm able to get my first look at this thing. And it's at this point I realize I just hate these handles. I mean, I like the handles, I like the shape, but they're just too big for this mug. They had to go. Fortunately, it was a chance to test the glue, which worked surprisingly well. Unless you get a hammer. Okay, handles round 2. You can use a Forstner bit for the inside to make sure that that shape is consistent and even. Then sketch out a really simple design on the outside. A little drilling, a little jigging. A little sanding, a little routing. A few more hammers. A little glue. Much happier with the second round handles. Okay, so to finish these things, I'm using Rubio Monocoat. Mainly because I had it left over from another project, but man, does this stuff go on smooth. It is marketed as food safe. I don't think you necessarily need that for the outside of the mug, but figured it couldn't hurt. that the end was in sight for this project, I figured I'd add a little finishing touch. I really liked how this oak looked in comparison to the wood of the mug itself, and thought that adding a little epoxy could give it both a little bit of shine, but also help seal the bottom of the mug. Once the bottom was dry, I moved to finishing the inside. Just like that, this project is done. All right, so here we are, bunch of wooden mugs. What am I gonna do with them? I don't know. Will I ever use them? Probably not, but they came out pretty good, and it was a simple, fun project to do overall. Let's talk about the things that I really liked about these mugs, and if I were to do this project again, I'd consider doing differently next time. Overall, I kind of like the design. I've gone back and forth between liking the 3 different types of wood as opposed to using just one solid wood, or maybe one type of wood for the mug and a different type of wood for the handle. These are unique. They're not going to be everyone's style, but I kind of like them. I definitely like the recessed bottoms. I think that gives some major dimension to the mug, and if you ever do turn this mug or you sip it to drink, I kind of like that the bottom's a little bit unique. I also like how the epoxy came out on the inside. Seems fine. I haven't drank anything out of it yet, but I think it'll be all right. I like my decision to change the handle. Feels really good in the hand. And I think for the design and the overall aesthetics of the mug, looks pretty good. What would I potentially do different? I would make these mugs a little bit more robust. And what I mean is these things are light. And when you're drinking from a big wooden mug, I think you want it to have a little weight and a little volume. So I probably would move these from 1/4 of an inch to a little bit thicker than that. But if I were to do it again, I would make these things taller. Moment of truth, let's give them a pour. Well, I got about a beer and 2/3 of a beer, so not exactly the 24 ounces I was shooting for, but now the mug's got a little bit of weight to it. Cheers. Doesn't taste like epoxy at all.